We're interviewing one of the descendants of the Douglas community, Miss Andrea Stimson Brooks. How are you today, Miss Andrea?
I am blessed and highly favored.
All right, that's wonderful. Well, we're excited to interview you today concerning the Douglas community. Could you go ahead and give us your name again and kind of how you landed in the Douglas community?
Okay, it's Andrea Stimson Brooks. The community knows me as Andie Stimson. Everybody knows me by that name versus Andrea. And I landed here from my coming down through the descendants of my great grandfather, who came as a free person. One of the first free people that migrated to Plano.
So, what was the name of your grandfather?
One grandfather was Mo Stimson, and the other grandfather was Andie Drake.
All right, okay. So, Andrea, tell us a little bit about what you recall about your childhood.
I recall our house being the house where all of the kids came, even with my mother's generation, all of their friends and her brother's friends. Our house was the house where everybody gathered for everything. To play, to eat. My grandmother fed the whole neighborhood, so everybody knew that. So that just continued, even when I was a kid. My friends would always come over and play. Our street was the street that all the kids came to play on because it was a dead-end street, so there was less traffic. So they gathered on our street and gathered at our house.
So, who were your grandparents?
Baby Doll, and A.J. Stimson.
Okay, and they were descendants of your great-grandfather?
Great, yes.
Great, okay. So, where did you go to school?
I started out going to school. Plano was segregated when I started school. So I went to Douglas, which is in the community where I live. And Plano integrated the school district when I was going to the 4th grade. So I finished elementary at Mendenhall. And from Mendenhall I went to Bowman. From Bowman I went to Williams. And from Williams I went to Plano Senior High.
Okay, so do you remember anything special about your years in school?
I remember when the school district first integrated and we had to go to school with white kids. That was like a shock for everybody. But believe it or not, we didn't even have any issues. I guess because we were kids, but we had only ever been around kids that we knew growing up, so when we first integrated and first started going to school with other kids of other races, it was different, we were just like tourists. And so were they, just looking and talking and trying to get to know, each other. So my biggest memory is that when I went to Bowman, 7th grade, I was a cheerleader and the first Black cheerleader in the city of Plano. So that was awesome.
Wow. So you made history with that.
I guess I did.
Do you remember about what year or around what years that might have been?
I was a cheerleader in the school year from 71 to 72.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so how was your social life in and out of school as a child?
I'm a very sociable person, very outgoing type person, so I don't really meet any strangers. So I socialize with everybody at school. Now, after school was totally different. It wasn't until I was much older, probably high school age, looking back, we were never invited to the home of the friends we made in school. So you never even think about that kind of stuff. We played with them all day in school, talked all day, did all of that. Became really close friends, but it was school friends. And I didn't even notice the difference that I didn't get to go to their house and stuff, So, but as far as after school, we all hung together in the neighborhood. They split the neighborhood up, unfortunately. So some of the kids went to the west side schools and some, like myself, went to the east side schools. So we would get to see each other after school. So we all got together just like we always did before any of that happened.
So what did you and your siblings do in your spare time?
We did a lot. I'm the oldest, so I felt responsible for them, not for both their education, making sure they did their homework, making sure they did their schoolwork, because education was a big thing with our grandparents. And So I wanted to make sure that they, were doing what they were supposed to do in school and also learning the lessons of life. Even sometimes it was the hard way. But I felt responsible for them. So I was like a parent.
All right. So do you have any family traditions?
The family traditions, I would say, is the fact that people just gather at the home, and on holidays, the entire family came to our house, my grandparents' house, every holiday, and sometimes birthdays and things like that. And, I would say that, and also, I don't know if you call this a tradition or not, but again, education was a big thing with our grandparents. So they continued to pass that on and feed that into us. And my grandfather fed the Bible into us as well. So, he was also real big on being spiritual, so that was a big thing to him as well.
So you mentioned celebrating holidays. What would that have looked like had I been a visitor at your family's house on a holiday?
It would have probably looked like you were partying at a club. Everybody dancing, talking, and the conversations were anything from something religious or spiritual to what's happening out there on the streets. And it would be multi-generations. Like my mom's generation, my generation, and my grandparents' generation, and it would be the aunts, the uncles, the great aunts, the great uncles, first cousins, second cousins, third, and so on, and friends. Whenever the neighborhood knew that it was a holiday, they would, not when they knew it was a holiday, on holidays, people in the neighborhood would even just stop by so that they could see the uncles maybe that they hadn't seen in a while, or just, just gather. So.
That's awesome. So how did you celebrate birthdays?
Birthdays are celebrated on the day of the person's birthday, no matter what day of the week that is. They get to choose what they would like to eat. So somebody either cooks or we order out and we get them whatever their preference is for their dinner or lunch, however we do that. And then we just, whoever can show up, they show up on that person's actual birthday.
All right. Is there anything in your family that has been passed down from generation to generation, like family heirlooms or any type of book or anything like that?
I have my great-grandmother's, paternal great-grandmother's rocking chair, and I have my great-aunt's paternal, like some of the furniture or whatever, that she had, and some of her costume jewelry, and somebody still has like my grandmother's ring and her Bible, so.
All right. Are there any stories that have been passed down, and what were those stories about?
There are like a ton of stories that were passed down from my grandfather and grandmother. If you just be with them for 5 minutes, they were like libraries. So you could hear how their childhood was, and what they learned as children and what was passed on to them, they passed on to us. Anything from just living in a world as a Black person to, again, spirituality and what it meant to their parents and grandparents and education.
All right. So you kind of mentioned it, but talk a little about your family. Were they religious? And how did that play a role in your life from childhood to even now?
Very, very religious. People used to say all the time that my grandfather should have been a preacher. He was a deacon in the church, but they always said he should have been a preacher because he was always spreading the word. And no matter who came into the house, no matter what the conversation started out being, at some point before they left, he was going to put the word of God in them, or at least share something about the Bible, and he would put it in a way that it sounded just like, hey, Ruth and them were going down the street. He would pull from the Bible, but he would make it like an everyday story, which I thought was just awesome, So that, and what was your question?
That was pretty much it. How did that religious upbringing play a role in your life, not only as a child but even now?
Oh, got you. It gives you the foundation that you need to to exist, in my opinion. And when it's so fed into your soul and spirit, you can't help but pass it along. Like I stopped going to church for a really long time, and I feel guilty every day, every minute, every hour because I wasn't. Because one time, before my grandfather passed away, he said, "Little girl, for some reason I noticed the only church you seem to be going to lately is Church's Chicken. You know, what's wrong with it? What's going on?" You know, so yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So what is the book you have in your hand? I noticed you have a book.
This book is my Bowman, when I went to Bowman. That was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And it is when I became a cheerleader. Like, I was a cheerleader in the 7th grade. In order to become a cheerleader, your 6th grade class, in my instance, had to vote. And they elected me to be a cheerleader going to the next grade. That's how cheerleaders were selected at that time. So this is the book. And I actually have a picture of my cheerleading team. And unfortunately, my book got totally wet. So it's kind of like, I know you can edit this, so can you Photoshop half some of this stuff out of there whenever you do it? And as you can tell, I'm unique, so you'll be able to pick me out.
That's great.
I have another one. Ready? Let me find it.
These are good memories, Andrea, really good memories.
They are. I'll take them.
Did you keep anything else, like maybe a cheerleading jacket or?
I do. I have my Bowman cheerleading jacket, not here with me, but I have that jacket. I have my high school jacket because I was on the basketball team up until 10th grade, I think, and then I became like the manager. So.
Did you play basketball, cheerleading, anything else?
I did track.
Okay.
I did just about that. Volleyball. I did anything that I could possibly participate in. This one's harder to see. But there's another picture. They just snapped, the school just snapped one of the basketball game, it looks like.
So how was your life different from your early childhood to your young adult life?
How is it different?
From being a child to being a young adult. What did you do differently as a young adult? How did you grow into that?
Well, I would say once Plano integrated and all of that, that kind of opened up the world to us and other cultures and things like that, stuff I never paid attention to, that people that didn't look like me, they do stuff totally different. They had different, we didn't eat the same type of food, that they ate. We didn't participate in the same type of things that they did. So it expanded my world as far as somebody having a boat or somebody going skiing, stuff that we didn't really even have in our world.
Okay, so now what are some skills you learned growing up that really impacted your life?
Skills, I learned that honesty is the best way to go in life. And I'm the kind of person that what you see is what you get. And I would say that comes from trying to be honest in all things. And I learned to not judge people based on how they look. You judge them from like what Martin Luther King said, based on the content, of their character. So those are two big lessons I would say that I've kept.
All right. Did you have a job as a teen or young adult? And if so, where did you work and what did you do?
My grandparents wouldn't let me work. They said education is what you need to be focused on, so you will not have a job. So I didn't really want one anyway, so I was okay with that. So I didn't work until I think my first job was my second year in college, I think, and that was at a Safeway. My boyfriend's uncle was the manager, so he hired me. So I worked at Safeway that was my very first job. And then Travelers Insurance was my real job a year or so later.
Now, what is Safeway?
Safeway is a grocery store that probably, I know it doesn't exist in Texas. I don't know if it's anywhere else, but that was actually the grocery store when I was a kid, was Safeway.
All right. So were there any, that you can remember, any natural disasters or political changes And if so, how did this affect you?
The worst thing ever was the assassination of Martin Luther King. I share a birthday with him. His birthday is January 15th, and so is mine. So I was always told as a kid how special I was because I was born on the same day that he was. That was the most horrific thing ever. And then the next year, I think it was the assassination of the president. I mean, that was horrible. I don't remember any nature-related disasters. I'm sure there were probably some, but I don't recall those. The assassination of Martin Luther King and the president are the two things that that's what did it for me. The rest of anything else is faded away or just not in my memory because that took over everything.
Do you remember anything about the climate change in Douglas community when those assassinations happened? Like, did it change the community environment, or were there any special comings together or anything like that?
I've never seen such sadness and hopelessness. Even as a kid, you pick up on vibes like that, and you could just see it in people's eyes. Most people couldn't even say hello without just bursting into tears. You didn't have to ask them what they were crying about because you knew. You knew that lasted for years and years. And even if you go talk to some of the elders today, if you talk about it, it's going to bring up that pain. You know, even with me, and I was a kid, you know, so yeah, it did change. But as a people, as Black people, we have overcome so much, and we've overcome slavery. So people did overcome, you know, and life keeps going no matter what. But the sadness was there.
Okay, so how has the neighborhood changed over the years?
The neighborhood has changed, most noticeably the residents, the makeup of the neighborhood has changed. When I was a kid, there weren't any white people that lived in our neighborhood. And there weren't any, I don't think even Hispanics in our neighborhood. I think every single home, it was Black people. Now through marriage, yes, you know, but as far as original homeowners, no. And the architecture of the neighborhood has changed due to the developers and other people coming in, tearing down the original homes, building new homes, and it's changed the structure. Prior to that, every home, there was land, there was space, there was big yards, front, back. Now that's no longer in existence. The houses are kind of close together on some of the streets, and you can tell the difference of an original home that was here, or you know, that was kept up to date versus Habitat for Humanity and the other investors and companies that have come in and built.
Okay. Were there any stores or anything like that in the neighborhood then that aren't today?
I was just about to say that. We had a candy store, we had a juke joint, which we couldn't go to the juke joints. There was a couple of those. Those were for like adults only. We could go during the daytime because the juke joints served a dual purpose. And by juke joint, I mean where adults went to drink and dance, they played music, they partied. It was like a club, what you call a nightclub today. So in the daytime we could go because it was a candy store too. We could buy candy. And then there were actually people who had their homes set up as candy store. So we would just say, hey, we're going to the candy ladies, you know? So while we're talking about the neighborhood, let me say this. When I was a kid, and even when my siblings were growing up, the neighbors were very invested in us and what happened to us and how we conducted ourselves as human beings and little adults or little people. That's a very true saying. It takes a neighborhood or a village to raise a child. That's what happened when I was growing up, and when my siblings are growing up, that's gone. That's no longer the case, and I think that's something that's truly sad.
All right, one last question, Andrea. If there was something that you could say to the future generation concerning where you are now and what you've come through so that they can have a bit of history to hold on to, what would you say to the future generations about this generation and the ones before you?
I would say to future generations, find the elders. Any elder that you know, spend time, have a conversation, because those are libraries and they're soon gonna be gone. If you can't you have to know where you came from in order to know where you're going. And they need to invest in understanding our history, and not just our history, just history period. What did other cultures do? What did other races do? That's what I would say to them. Invest in your elders, getting to know where you came from. And, just always try to find you some kind of spiritual path so that you're grounded in whatever it is that you do. It doesn't matter what that looks like, but you need to find some kind of spirituality and have a greater presence in your life that you can, seek in times of need and joy, all of that. So.
Wonderful, Andrea. We thank you so very much for taking the time out to interview with us and to leave this piece of history with future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Be blessed. Peace and blessings.